Chapter 9. Whenever Maggie looked back upon her first full morning at Adelphi Hills, she would think only of its profound silence. So quiet was the house, so still. She felt as though it had been frozen into a painting, and for a long time she couldn't tell whether it was too early for anyone to be awake or too late for anyone to still be at home. At last she rose and parted the curtains. It was barely morning. The garden was whitened with pale dew, and the birches where she had laid out her little rooms with sticks the day before, hung like slender ghosts against a gray sky. How would she be awakened here, she wondered. In some places there would be a clangorous bell, in others a house mother would snap the window shades open, letting the glare of the day attack your eyes. But there was no bell or house mother here, and the two aunts who found her impossible to handle might decide not to awaken her at all. The tray had been left outside her door the night before. That had been removed. Maggie had heard it being lifted from the floor, and she had heard, too, the rustle of a dress and the sound of footsteps disappearing down the hall. She sat on the window seat a long time, watching the color seep back into the lawn and wondering what it was going to be like to live in a boarding school, or whatever this was, with no other children. Often, walking about among the halls and grounds of her old schools, she had pretended that the buildings had been emptied of everyone but herself, and she had suddenly become their sole inhabitant. This big room would be my bedroom, she had decided, and the auditorium will be a ballroom where I dance alone. It will have red wallpaper and a black rug, and there will be white curtains on all the windows. Those were her favorite colors, red and black and white, the colors of her playing cards. The best part was always the garden. Usually she would let it remain unchanged. The concrete playing field and the groups of trees would stay as they were. The only difference would be that no one else would be there, and she would aim basketballs at the hoop and wind among the trees, totally alone, her whole life through. Now she had an enormous house to herself, and she wondered what it would be like. Suddenly she got dressed, not in any of the dresses hanging ghost-like from the pole in the closet, but in her own clothes. A thin skirt, too cool for a late September day, a tan blouse with a split in the underarm seam, and unmatched socks, and slowly made her way along the hall and down the stairs. The gray morning light was beginning to creep through the parlor curtains and settle on the gray of the walls, leaving no glow. The first thing Maggie saw was the pair of portraits above the mantel, and she gazed up at the two austere faces, noticing today something she had missed the day before. A small black and white dog curled at the man's feet. Maggie put her hand out. "Don't touch!" a voice cried, and Maggie spun around. Her two great aunts were seated side by side, quiet as cats, on the gray plush sofa. Their bodies were erect, their hands folded in their laps, and their eyes fastened intently upon her. They were wearing different colors today, and Maggie had to squint in the gray light to find the freckles that would distinguish one from the other. "Paintings are to be admired by the eye, not the hand," one of them said. Aunt Harriet, wrinkles, no freckles. "That is a rule. Remember it at all times." Maggie turned back to the pictures, her hands at her sides now, and examined the dog curled sleepily at the foot of its master. "Look at your aunt when she speaks to you." That was the other one, Aunt Lillian. Freckles. "And don't squint. Squinting weakens the muscles of the eye." Maggie faced her two aunts again, looking from one to the other, and finally dropping her eyes to the rug with its vines and blossoms, still colorless in the early light. Aunt Harriet suddenly spoke out. "Those were the founders of the academy," she explained. "This building at one time housed a girls' school, and it was founded by the two people whose portraits you see, the Greens." They were our ancestors, Aunt Lillian put in. They are your ancestors as well, she added, running her eye over Maggie's body, although I can't say they would be happy to know it. Her ancestors. Maggie jumped at the thought, and her eyes shot back to the two faces in their sturdy frames. Imagine having ancestors when she didn't even have a mother and a father. Now we're the only ones left, continued Aunt Lillian. We and your Uncle Morris, and you, of course, she added with a sigh. Uncle Morris. Where was Uncle Morris? She realized now that all of the rooms she had entered the day before, none seemed to belong to him. Where did he sleep? The academy was founded as a school for carefully chosen girls, Aunt Lillian went on. Girls with character. Character is the most important element in a human being's life. Remember that at all times. The founders cared a great deal about character. Character and healthful living, Aunt Harriet said. Stop sucking your hair. That's disgusting, Habit. Disgusting. They ran the school for nearly 50 years, and it was thought to be one of the finest in the country. Then came the misfortune, and now the academy is down the road, Aunt Lillian interrupted, and it is run by the people who take any children at all. They take children of wealth, Aunt Harriet said. Wealth and character do not always agree. They take boys, Aunt Lillian said. They will take you, Aunt Harriet told Maggie. Tomorrow you will begin attending New Adelphi Hills Academy. It is not at all like the original, but nothing else is available, and you will receive a small amount of learning there. As for your character, we will look into that ourselves. School tomorrow. She would have to go to school. A day school, where everybody went home after every afternoon instead of just on weekends or not at all. A rich kid school. A rich kid school. Her stomach sank. Stand up straight, Aunt Harriet said. A healthy body requires a straight spine. Say that to yourself several times a day. A healthy body requires a straight spine. And change your clothes, Aunt Lillian added. You're having a visitor today. A visitor? Maggie's spine stiffened of its own accord, and she stepped back into the quiet gaze of the man and woman in black and white over the mantel. What visitor? In the past, a visitor had meant a doctor who pried open your clenched teeth with a slab of wood, or a psychologist who asked you to draw a picture of a family and then remained silent when you scribbled a parade of tiny spiders along the bottom of the paper. We have invited a friend for you, Aunt Lillian explained. She is the granddaughter of an acquaintance of ours, and her name is Jeanette. A friend? I don't want a friend. Everyone wants a friend. Aunt Lillian answered, Happy is a house that shelters a friend. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote that. You must read Ralph Waldo Emerson. He will improve your character. Maggie withdrew her hair from her mouth and painted little circles on her cheek with its sharpened point. I don't want a friend, she repeated, backing against the wall. Jeanette is a wholesome child. You need wholesome companions. She is also an accomplished singer. She has the voice of a lark. If you ask her, she will sing for you. I don't want a lark, a friend. I don't want a friend. Jeanette... Sorry. Pause. Go. Jeanette wore her hair in a single heavy braid clasped at top and bottom with purple beads. Her eyes were wide-set and brown, and around her wrist she wore a silver chain with a slim oval plate that Maggie knew, without looking, bore the engraving of her name. All the girls at her other schools, the girls with families, not the charity girls like her, had them. Jeanette crossed the room toward her and unexpectedly extended her hand. Maggie had never before shaken hands with anyone, and she remained frozen on the rug. After a long moment, Jeanette pulled Maggie's hand from behind her back and gave it a vicious squeeze. How do you do? She said. And she took a seat next to the window, where she crossed and recrossed her ankles with their straight white socks evenly matched. Maggie sat against the opposite wall and riffled the pages of a copy of National Geographic. Glancing at the pictures, birds mostly, she lifted one page to her face and squinted at it with extreme care. Jeanette leaned over and measured the height of one sock against the other. Then she ran her fingernail along the wall, making Maggie's skin freeze. At last she spoke. "Do you like actors and actresses?" Maggie didn't look up. "I don't go to the movies." "I mean the game." Maggie turned 3 more pages and came face to face with an owl. "I don't play any games," she said evenly. "I'm too old for games." "I'm older than you. And anyway, it's not kind of a game you play with pieces or anything. It's a talking game. First, I think of an actor, say, and I give you his initials and you try to guess who it is. If you guess right, it's your turn. Otherwise, I go again. You want to play?" "No." Jeanette fell silent and began exploring the room with her eyes. "What's that?" she finally asked, pausing at the curio cabinet. Maggie turned the page. An ad for t-shirts with pictures of endangered animals printed across their chests. A whale. A whooping crane. "What?" she asked, not looking up. "In that cabinet." Maggie glanced at the china ballerina balancing on one toe, and once again longed to run her finger along the edge of its brittle skirt. "That's mine," she said. "It's a dancer. It's all made of china, even the skirt." "No, I mean the elephants on the other shelf." Maggie shrugged. "I don't know. They're elephants." "They look creepy. This whole house is creepy. How come everything is so dark in here? Everybody says this place is haunted. My brother told me not to come. He said they used to have a boarding school or something here, and then something happened, and it's been haunted ever since. Nobody wants to come here, except your uncle, and even he doesn't want to come here. My brother says your uncle's crazy." Maggie slowly tore off a piece of her thumbnail and put it in her mouth. "Then Uncle Morris didn't live here. He only visited." "Where did he live?" She turned back to her magazine and the room fell silent again. "Who are those?" Jeanette asked after a while. Maggie turned another page. "Who?" she asked, not looking up. "In those pictures." Maggie glanced briefly at the 2 faces in the paintings. "I don't know," she said. "Ancestors." She removed the softened thumbnail from her mouth and dropped it to the floor. "You want to do something?" Jeanette's voice broke through the silence. "You want to play a game or what? You want to play Ghost?" Maggie jumped slightly. "What?" "Ghost." Maggie turned another page. "There's no such thing," she said. "No, the word game, dummy. Don't you even know how to play Ghost?" "No." "You spell out words," Jeanette said. "First I say a letter, and then you say a letter, and you keep on going until you spell a word. Then if the word ends on you, you get G for ghost, and then the first person who gets ghost is out. Suppose I say B. Now you say a letter." Maggie studied a picture of an island filled with black and white birds with triangular red bills. "Say a letter," Jeanette insisted. "P," Maggie finally said. "P?" "Mm-hmm." "What word is that supposed to be?" "Puffin. It's a bird." "But I already said B." So there's no word that begins BP. You get G for ghost. You're 1/5 of a ghost. There's no such thing. Jeanette inserted a finger into her sock and slowly scratched the back of her heel. "You know why I don't go to the same school as you?" she asked. "Because I go to a performing arts school. I'm training to be a concert singer, and I'm going to go on tour and stuff. I studied voice. Voice is what you study when you're going to be a singer." The tone of her voice was familiar, and Maggie recognized it as the one she used when she addressed her 5 little girls from the backwoods. "That's a lie," she said. There was silence in the room for a long moment, and Jeanette suddenly burst out. "I know all about you. My grandmother told me. She told me your mother and father were killed in a car crash or something, and you've been thrown out of a whole bunch of boarding schools and foster homes, and finally your aunts took you because no one else wanted you, and they had to because they're relatives." Maggie flipped the pages of the magazine quickly and stopped suddenly at a glossy study of a brown and gray bird. It had speckles on its creamy breast, and it resembled a sparrow more than anything else. But in flight it took command of the entire page, and the trees in the distance were small and vague beneath the spread of its wings. It was a lark, the caption said. An old world lark. And she could see by its open beak that it was in full song. In a moment she had tipped the page in half, then in half again, so that she had 4 fluttering strips of broken wings and fragmented feathers. Then she crushed it into a solid ball, and walking, almost marching, step, stop, step, stop, across the room, she reached Jeanette's frozen figure, and in a quick movement pressed the crumpled bird hard against her mouth. A soft cry arose like the cry of a rubber doll when Maggie had pressed its face in the day before, and Jeanette's face flamed. I think you're rotten, Jeanette whispered, pulling the pieces of paper from her lips. You're rotten, she said. You're the rottenest person I've ever met. I'm glad your mother and father are dead. I feel sorry for them having to live with you, she began, moving away now. I'm glad you have to live in this creepy house with your aunts. A few bits of paper still clung to her mouth, and Maggie saw part of a beak on one tooth and on another a piece of wing. And you can't hurt me by staring at me like that either. I don't have to look at you at all. I don't have to look at you ever again, in fact. I don't have to come back here. I only came because my grandmother made me, and I'm never coming again. Never, never, never. Aunt Harriet and Aunt Lillian were suddenly standing at the parlor door, and the 2 girls sprang apart. What's happening here? One of them asked. What's that all over the floor? It's a game, Maggie answered quickly. A game? What sort of game is it that requires you to strew paper all over the rug? Maggie picked up some of the shreds from the floor. Ghost, she answered, throwing the torn bits of wings and beak into the fireplace beneath the 2 portraits with their pale faces and distant eyes.